Hello everyone. This week at N.E.S.T Outreach we're going to be looking at vocab. In particular, we're going to be looking at transition sentence starter words. And we will look at words which are helpful for starting sentences, which can add contrast and colour, and to make language more interesting and sophisticated. So when you're starting a sentence, instead of starting it with just the noun, or the, or he, she, they did this, we're going to think about how we can make our sentences more interesting and flow on from each other. So the structure of today's lesson: number 1, we're going to overview the 4 main types of transition words. Number 2, we'll have a summary list of examples to use. Number 3, we'll have an example from a paragraph. Number 4, we'll be using set transition words. Number 5, have a go at writing our own sentences. Number 6, a recap. Number 7, we're going to be changing our own paragraph so we can include some of these new sentence starters. So these are really helpful ways of improving your own learning and helpful for creative writing or practical things like a CV or document. So these are the 4 main categories. Number 1, words to show contrast. So these words make the last sentence seem different to the other and help emphasise this difference. For example, one good word which can be used is the word however. So this morning I walked into town to meet my friend. However, I forgot what time I was supposed to meet them, so we didn't see each other. So you're showing a contrast from the previous sentence. However, I forgot what time it was, so I didn't meet them. So your second sentence is contradicting your original statement. This shows, where it contrasts the previous one. It shows a simple start to the first sentence, starting with this morning. So this morning, that's quite a basic way to start a sentence, it's stating something. And however is a more complex example. It's a good transition word. As a general rule, and that's another complex transition starter there, these words usually are followed by a comma. There's a comma after however to add pause and an emphasis and a change in how you're going to display it. Okay, the second form of transition sentence starters are words that add to an idea or build on the previous sentence. These words, in contrast to the first example, are to help build emphasis on the last sentence. For example, the shop was filled with busy workers and loud noises. Also, there were many different products available to buy. So this is building on the idea of the shop being busy and active. It's also got a wide range of products available. Another substitute we could use is furthermore. The shop was filled with busy workers and loud noises. Furthermore, there were many different products available to buy. So this is a way of saying, if we split this up into 2 words, further and more, further going longer or increased, and more is additionally. So it's a singular word made up of 2 words, but it helps build on an idea. The third category, words that show cause. These words show a link to the previous sentence which directly caused something else. At 2:30 p.m. it started to rain. Consequently, I put on my waterproof jacket. So consequently means something happened as a consequence of the previous issue. Another word we can use to show cause is therefore. So we've swapped around the idea of this next sentence. At 2:30 the sun came out. Therefore, I took off my jacket. So you're taking off your jacket because it's warm, and the therefore highlights what the previous sentence says. point number 4. Finally, words that add emphasis. So these words build on and construct something that builds on the same theme of the previous sentence. They're helpful ways of rounding something up. A good word to use with this is primarily. For example, John decided to quit his job. Primarily, this was because of the stress it had caused him. Primarily is a way of emphasizing the main reason for something. Prime is a prime number, and it means one or singularly, and it is the main cause for something. Another good way to start with one of these words is to use in conclusion. In conclusion, the government's health advice was inadequate because of a lack of planning. So it helps summarise the position and the overall emphasis on it. Now here's a good example of transitional sentence starters based on the 4 categories. Now there's a lot to take in here. I'll explain some of them, but not all of them, but they are all useful. So first of all, words to show contrast. However. So you could say, it was sunny this morning, however, it started to rain later in the day. Although. Conversely. In contrast. Instead. In comparison. Nevertheless. Whereas. Yet. On the one hand, or on the other hand. Now this is a idiom, so it doesn't mean literally one hand you're holding start of the sentence, and then the second hand you're starting the other sentence with. It's an expression to use which highlights that something is different. So on the one hand, the sky is blue. On the other hand, the grass is green, for example. On the contrary, contrary is contrived or different, so it's a contrast. Other than, outside of, rather, still, besides, comparatively, different from, even though, otherwise, however, we've already explained that, and separately. Okay, great. Now the next category is words that add to an idea. So we have additionally. In addition, if you think of maths and mathematics, an addition is adding 2 numbers together. So the next sentence might help flow on from the previous because you're adding to the idea. Additionally. Moreover, and again this is one of those compound words, so more and over have joined together to make moreover, which kind of means the same as in addition. Additionally is useful for when you're talking about a list. Next up we've got furthermore. Again, this is compound, so you can further and more. We've explained that before. Next we've got as well as. It's the same as additionally, they're kind of similes. Another reason, so that could be when you're explaining an argument or a position. Along with is kind of similar, so it's alongside. Also, we had that in the example at the start, so also is a good one to use. Compared, coupled with, correspondingly. For example, in addition, indeed, in fact, identically, likewise, again, similarly, whereas, likewise, we've already had that. One other thing, moreover, plus. Okay, great. Category 3 are words that show cause, so this sentence as is a direct result of what's been stated in the previous sentence. We have accordingly, as a result, because, consequently, due to, for this reason. So you could say, it was sunny outside this morning. For this reason, John put on his coat. For this purpose, hence, otherwise, since, so then, subsequently, therefore, thereupon. Now this is a very old-fashioned phrase, you might not hear this, but it means something relating to a place. So, I walked to the end of the street, thereupon I put on my hat. This is why, thus, wherefore, again very archaic or old-fashioned. Following this, as you can see, for all of those reasons, consequently, henceforth. Okay, so they're all examples of words that show cause. The final category, words that add emphasis. So we have admittedly, which kind of says you're admitting to something. So I decided to jump off a bridge into the river. Admittedly, this was a bad idea. So you're owning up to something in a way, saying this admittedly. Words that add emphasis. Above all. Above all, so that's a good concluding remark. Above all, the main reason for the fall of the Roman Empire was economic factors, for example. As a rule, so that's also a good way of having a general conclusion. As usual, so that's something that typically happens. As usual, John had his breakfast at 9 o'clock. Assuredly, that means you're very certain of something. Certainly, again, similarly to assuredly. Chiefly, which is kind of like primarily, the main reason. The chief, the person in charge, or the thing in charge, the main cause. Especially, as a particular reason, is the most important. Granted, generally speaking, for the most part, in this situation, no doubt or undoubtedly, obviously, of course, ordinarily, particularly, singularly, unquestionably, usually, in conclusion, primarily. So there's quite a lot there, you might not have heard them all, so don't worry if you don't get it. You can do a print screen here and save it on Microsoft Paint, which is a really good tool to use, and they'll come in handy later on when we're doing our own sentences. Okay, just scrolling down. Example of using transition words. So here's an example paragraph where we don't have transition words, and we're going to see what happens after we add the transition words. Cell phones, or smartphones in today's speak, have changed our family communication for the worse. Parents complain about their teenagers spending too much time on their phones. Teenagers are annoyed that they can't get the attention of their parents, who are always working or shopping on their phones. We need to make some changes. Okay, so at each sentence you're actually starting with quite a basic start. So you've got cell phones, parents, teenagers, we. They're all nouns. They're all nouns of a thing that is doing something in the next part of the sentence. So it gets quite formulaic and rigid. This did that, that did this. And here's what happens if we add transition words. The first one is generally speaking. Cell phones have changed our family communications for the worse. And this is a category 4, which means it is words that add emphasis. Generally speaking, cell phones have changed our family communication for the worse. So whereas previously it's quite a matter-of-fact opinion you're stating, cell phones have changed our family communications for the worse, here you're saying generally speaking, so it's a bit more vague and it makes it less sincere or less exact. 4, the next sentence, obviously, again this is a category 4, so it's adding emphasis. Obviously, parents complain about their teenagers spending too much time on their phones. Moreover, which is category 2, as in it builds on the previous idea. Moreover, teenagers are annoyed that they can't get the attention of their parents, who are always working or shopping on their phones. Unquestionably, we need to make some changes. And that's also a category 4, adding emphasis. So we can see that this is a much more interesting and dynamic paragraph than the first one. It adds depth and it adds colour to the piece. Now I'm going to ask you to fill in these sentences with an appropriate word. The form of sentence starter will be given, so which category it is. Oops, I've given you the answers already here, so okay, you didn't see that. The cook burnt the toast, and next we want a transition word that shows contrast, so I'll give you some time to fill that in. Next up, the floor was too slippery, full stop. Transition starter, the area was closed off to the public. Next off, the book was well written and enjoyable, full stop. Sentence starter, the new word, it was available to buy in most shops. The website was confusing and hard to navigate, and in this space I want you to add a word, a sentence transition that adds emphasis. This is not the case for similar websites. I'll just give you some time to do that. Pause the video now, it might be a good time to do that. And you can look back at these. So if you're still pausing the video, I'll resume from here and give you some answers that I thought might be good. The cook burnt the toast, full stop. And a contrasting sentence starter. As a result, contrast. So we're going to use the cook burnt the toast. However, remember this important word we looked at. However, the customers chose to eat it anyway. So that's a contrasting to the previous sentence. The floor was too slippery, full stop. And next up we want a cause, sentence starter. The area was closed off to the public. Therefore, I'm going to use here, which is quite a good one. The floor was too slippery. Therefore, the area was closed off to the public. Another one we could use is consequently. Consequently, the area was closed off to the public. So when you get a wet toilet and you put one of those yellow signs up, that is because the floor was too slippery and it's closed off to the public. Next up, the book was well written and enjoyable. Full stop. And build, emphasis, we're going to say in addition. In addition, it was available to buy in most shops. Finally, the website was confusing and hard to navigate. And next up we want a word to add emphasis. And we're going to use moreover. Oh no, this is build. So think of a good example. Especially as. So this is a good transition word, and we could actually make this into two sentences or clauses. So the website was confusing and hard to navigate, especially as this is not the case for similar websites. Okay, next up we're going to try and design our own sentence to make sure you have at least one from each category, and try and design these sentences or have these examples using 1, 2, 3, 4, all those different types. Okay, make sure you have at least one for each and try and design 5. Okay, and pause the video now. It might be a good time for you to do that, and you can do this in your own time whenever you want. So let's have a quick look over the previous slide where we're looking at the 4 types. We have words to show contrast, words to add to an idea, words to show cause, words to show emphasis. As a quick recap. Finally, we're going to be looking at an example paragraph below, and I want you to change it using transition words at the start of each new sentence. Each ellipses, now ellipses is just a line of dots, represents where you can put in a transition word. Today, Phil drove the van all the way across the town without much sleep the previous night. Next sentence, and a transition starter. Blank, he was tired from the long journey, but knew he had to get to work. Full stop. Next sentence, blank. He then unpacked the back of the van so that he could refill it with stock. And stock is another word for material or goods. So your biscuits, tea, toilet roll, that kind of thing. Full stop. Next sentence. Transition starter blank. It would have been quicker to do this with more help. Full stop. Transition starter blank. His assistant was off ill from work. Full stop. And blank. Transition starter. This frustrated Phil. Full stop. Once he got back to the shop, he began to unload the stock. Full stop. Blank. Transition starter. This was the busiest time of the day for him. Full stop. Blank. Transition starter. Once this task was complete, he had a tea break. Full stop. Blank. Transition starter. Whilst this was a harder day than usual, he managed fairly well. Full stop. Blank. Transition starter. There had been worse days in work previously. So you can pause the video now, and it's a good time to have a look back at the old examples we've got back here, and then you can try and fill in these green gaps here. And then if you pause the video, and then I'll give you some time to do it. There's quite a lot here, and remember, there's no right or wrong answer, so don't be too concerned, because multiple options could fit in each one. Okay, so I'll just let you pause the video and then I'll move on. Okay, so here's the example of the paragraph that's now been changed to add transition words in. Today, Phil drove the van all the way across town without much sleep the previous night. Consequently, this is the word I've used because it shows a cause. This is a causational word. Consequently, he was tired from the long journey, but knew he had to get the job done. Full stop. Afterwards, he then unpacked the back of the van so that he could refill it with stock. Full stop. Normally, it would have been quicker to do it with more help. Full stop. However, his assistant was off ill from work, so I've used going back afterwards, which implies a time change. Afterwards, he then unpacked the back of the van so that he could refill it with stock. Normally, so this is an emphasis word, it would have been quicker to do it with more help. Full stop. However, this is showing contrast here. His assistant was off ill from work. Full stop. Therefore, so this is relating as another causal example, this frustrated Phil. Once he got back from the shop, he began to unload the stock. Full stop. Next transition word, typically. So this is adding emphasis. Typically, this was the busiest time of the day for him. Full stop. For this reason, again we have a causal transition word or phrase. For this reason, once this task was complete, he had a tea break. Full stop. Overall, emphasis word here. Whilst this was a harder day than usual, he managed fairly well. Full stop. Besides, comma, there had been worse days in work previously, so besides is a good example here. So that's just an example of how I've rechanged this paragraph, and it makes it a lot more interesting and dynamic to read. It's just a good example that you can use. So today we've looked at transition sentence starter words. We've had a look at the four main types of these words. We've got a summary list in that grid that you can use. An example from a paragraph. And we've used our own set transition words. We've had a go at writing our own sentences in our own time. We've had a quick recap. And finally we had that paragraph with Phil in the van and describing his daily routine, but in relation to adding further transition starters. So I hope that's been helpful, and if it's been too fast you can pause, go back, revise, start using these examples, start trying to bring it into everyday language and also in your writing, and it'll be really helpful and beneficial for developing English language skills. So I hope that's been helpful, and thank you very much.